Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our full council today, Thursday, 22nd of February. I'd like to start with our declarations of interest. Are there any, please? Councillor Mumford.
Yes, I'd like to declare a pecuniary interest when we're discussing park house fees.
Thank you. Councillor Roger.
I declare a non-pecuniary interest in item number 8.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick.
I'd like to declare a minor interest in agenda item 9 as the property adjacent to the application is owned by family members.
Thank you. Item 2 on our agenda are the minutes of our previous meeting held on the 23rd of January. Are there any issues around those minutes, please? Then could I have a proposer and a seconder for their adoption? Councillor Marcus, Councillor Roger. All those in favour? That's passed. Thank you very much. Item 3 on our agenda is Chairman's announcements. And I have an announcement to make about our transport connectivity. This is a statement from me personally as chairman of this council, but I'm aware that many of these points are also shared widely amongst our members. I'm sure most of you are aware that we have now received notification from ministers that the £48 million grant allocated to our council for new ships to provide more resilient, reliable and affordable Sea Link services has now been withdrawn by central government. This is because the government cannot use public funds to go into competition with an existing commercial operator, which is understood. Our operator has chosen to pursue its own commercial interests in place of an order for foreign-built ships using borrowed funds. This is the second time we have seen an offer from central government to fund new ships be withdrawn, which I find unbelievable. I am genuinely concerned that this may undermine any further opportunities for central government to assist us in the future. The withdrawal of the Levelling Up funding brings to an end the immense amount of work put in by your council, the Department for Transport and ministers to try and work with the Steamship Group to deliver an acceptable solution for all parties. I am of the view that there was an acceptable solution on the table for all parties. A solution that would not only deliver new ships, but also enable affordable fares and freight costs, better schedules with higher levels of customer service, whilst maintaining the profit levels of the Steamship Group. I am not satisfied with the correctness of the reasons given by Steamship Group for refusing the grant. The prospect of the operation of the new ships being subject to competitive tendering at some point in the future has once again proved to be unacceptable to the operator. The introduction of competition would have driven greater efficiencies, higher customer service standards, reduced environmental impact, and most importantly, more affordable passenger fares and freight tariffs. Using the quote of our legendary former Prime Minister, this is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end, but is perhaps the end of the beginning. The withdrawal of the Levelling Up funding does not mark the end, but the beginning of a wider range of activities, the aim of which will be to improve our transport connectivity as a whole. Your council remains totally committed to achieving the transport services our community, businesses and visitors need to provide the islands with a sustainable future. We are already working with central government to not only address the issues I have just mentioned, but to find solutions to make our airport financially sustainable and safeguard our air links. Further work is also proposed to increase the frequency and reduce the cost of inter-island links, similar to the scheme on the mainland for local bus journeys. Our sea links need to provide more winter options in order to minimise the impact of flights being disrupted by the weather. We are currently in the process of arranging a scrutiny committee to provide members with an opportunity to question the operators on the sea link services they will be providing between the mainland and the islands in 2024 and in future years. This will be followed by a special full council meeting in March to allow members to debate and agree the way forward on our lifeline transport links, which are fundamental to every aspect of life on Scilly, whether it be housing, education, our economy, or just being able to continue to live here in a sustainable community. Thank you. Item 4 on our agenda is questions understanding Order 14. I have none. Item 5 is to consider reports from committees. I have none. Item 6 is to consider motions in accordance with Standing Order 12. I have none. And item 7 is urgent items. I have none. So we move straight on to part 1 item, agenda item 8, Children's Services, in the hands of our Director of Children's Services, Justine. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Before you today, you've got a report provided by myself. It gives you a summary of the progress work and the work that's been undertaken by Children's Services at present. So you have the summary of the steering groups. So the steering groups happen every 6 weeks, and that is up until the end of December. You also have the update report regarding the improvement board. Within that as well, there was a query regarding the governance of within the improvement plan. I've provided an appendix on that regarding the membership of that, because there was a query around that and how the governance board works. Additional to that, you also have the plan. And I hope everybody's had an opportunity to look through the plan. And I think that's probably all. I'm hoping that you've had an opportunity to read all of the papers. I'm happy to go through the headlines of each paper if you'd like me to, or go straight to questions.
Joel. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you. It's now 7 months since our inspection by Ofsted, which obviously resulted in our inadequate findings. So within that 7 months, we've got the improvement plan written, steering group and improvement board formed, various documentation has been produced, and some new staff members have come in. And that's documented within our suite of documents today. So I think what we've been trying to do is build the platform for continuous improvement. And I'm very keen that this improvement journey becomes very embedded in what we do. It would be relatively straightforward to do some quick fixes, but I don't think that sort of solves the problems. It just sort of papers over some of those cracks. So I think the work of the improvement board is really looking at how we can drive this forward as a much wider agenda. And to that end, we've tried to bring in some of the SEND services, so children with special educational needs, again, recognising that some of the professionals, some of the families, some of the services, some of the commission work we do has a lot of synergy between the two strands of work, the safeguarding work, which was based on the inspection, as well as the SEND work, which we want to improve, which is also inspected separately by Ofsted in due course. In the action plan, you'll see that we've got 2 RAG ratings. Again, that reflects the work we're doing, but also whether that's actually making a difference. How do we know that what we're doing is making a difference to the lives of a child, a young person, or a family? How do we know an outcome has been generated? How do we know that all the energy, all the effort, all the expense is hitting the targets? So that's in there, and we can explain that in due course. We do still have workforce complications. I know almost every business, every service in the authority on the island has challenges to do with recruitment and retention. So although we've recruited some staff recently, the social worker post, which was advertised for a month and closed relatively recently, we weren't able to shortlist to that. So again, it's a crucial piece of our jigsaw to have on islands experienced social workers who can dig into some of the work that we require them to do. So that was disappointing. And again, we need to look at those sorts of the packages and how that is put together to hopefully improve that position. We've also had some additional capacity paid for by the DFE and LGA, which is coming to an end. And again, that sort of creates budget pressures. It's the sort of work that helps put all the plans, helps do all the quality assurance, helps tell us where the gaps are, how we can make improvements. So again, we need to make sure that we've got sufficient capacity and expertise to drive that part of the work forward. At the steering board, we talked about priorities. How do we focus on the here and now, but also recognise that this is a 3-year journey at least. And some of the areas can be relatively quick wins, but when we've got issues to do with workforce culture, and that's workforce across the whole partnership, how do we shift that? And that's obviously much more of a challenge and needs much more time and investment, and also to build trust as well. So we've got to build trust with our service users, our community, our partners, and our small team and our wider team in a macro and micro sense. I've been also talking to Justine about what we as members can do as well. So some bits are very bureaucratic. As members, we're not going to have a great deal of input into them. We will trust our officers to drive that forward. But I think where we can take a key role is around corporate parenting, and understand what corporate parenting means. And that if a child were to be coming into our authority in a looked after capacity, we in the wider sense become de facto parents of that individual, and we take responsibility for the upbringing and some of the decisions which are made about that child's life. So we've got looked after children training coming up, corporate parenting training coming up in the near future. So I'd urge all members to try to sign up for that if possible, or at least do some homework and research into what that means. And I think also as an authority, I think the journey that Children's Services on is one we can also across the wider authority reflect on. I'm particularly aware that Adult Services will be having a similar sort of inspection through the work they're doing for the first time. So it's pretty clear when you go through the budget paper that Russell's prepared, the inadequate Ofsted inspection is costing us a huge amount of money, at least £200,000. So if we can be ahead of the game for other parts of the authority, I think it's time and money well spent. So I would just ask you, when you're reading the plan on the page, take away the word children and just read as a lead member, does what, if we were to insert adult instead of children, if we were to insert any other branch of the authority into that plan, where we've got lots of service level agreements, lots of commissioned services, are we really maximising the value for money? Are we getting that challenge in there? So as Children's Services go through this journey, I think the wider council can probably learn and support the whole process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Williams. Justine, do you want to come back? Are you on?
So,
No. Okay. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, no, it's really good to see the plan being actioned and going forward. It's good to see that we're getting reports on it as well. Good points were, there's obviously some questions about it, which I've emailed Justine loads of questions and she was great at getting back to me about that. I'm not going to go through all of those now because we've got a long agenda. But what I will ask is, on one of the points there was talk about the training about the mock SDs. So the remind me again what SD stands for.
So apologies, strategy discussion. So that's where Children's Services believe when a child is at risk of harm or immediate harm, we then have what is called a strategy discussion with partner agencies. Minimum has to be with the police. Children's Service chairs it. Police have to be in attendance. Ideally, you have health and other agencies, typically school or whoever the that child is working
So, and what did you learn from these mock SDs then?
So the opportunity of the strategy discussions is to skill up some of our workforce and our staffing. So typically for the Council of the Isles of Scilly, we don't hold many strategy discussions. It's one of our core statutory responsibilities to ensure that we can undertake safeguarding. So typically when I worked in a different authority, I would hold 5 a day. We don't even have that a year here. So how do we ensure that our staff are skilled up to be able to participate and be able to be involved in those meetings, but also how do we share the learning with partners? So in these strategy discussions, which Essex as our improvement partner helped us with, so they provided live case studies that they've undertaken, so they know what the outcome is. So it's interesting to see what our workings out and was it the same. We also asked the head and the director of adult services to chair. So both myself and Scott Fuller both have a qualification in qualified social work. However, I've specialised in children and Scott is specialised in adults. What we supported Scott with is to chair one of those meetings. So if somebody was not around in children's services, Scott was able to have a learning opportunity to undertake that. So he did that and Essex provided their feedback, but also gave an opportunity for partners to be involved in that as well. So they understood their role and how they could support and a learning opportunity. We didn't have all partners attending. Police were in attendance and all of their staff have been through that training. Other partners haven't attended or didn't take up the 2 days, the 2 different sessions of opportunity.
Okay, well, but you're doing it again.
Yep.
And
Yep, so
just
we've
inviting
offered
other-
back to partners whether they would like an evening session. There is not an appetite for an evening session here.
Okay, so hopefully they'll join in
Yes.
close to the time.
Because if for some reason they don't, for whatever reason, I will go back to the agency and understand why they're not able to participate. If they don't participate, I will raise that through the OSCP, so our Safeguarding Children's Partnership with the next line manager up, really.
Okay. Also, yeah, on page, in the notes of the improvement board, Joel's just mentioned about adult services having a mini inspection as well, informal inspection. Obviously, it's out the bounds of this discussion, but it'd be good to make sure that we get the results of that. Maybe they come to scrutiny.
Yes, so just in respect of that, I'm aware that adults have been also supported by the LGA, and one of the recommendations out of that learning is there's quite a lot of crossover work between children's and adults, and actually where can we skill each other up in our services, but also where's the crossover, how can we prevent duplication, and how can we skill our workforce up, and what can we use across.
Okay. And just the whistleblowing aspect as well is quite interesting in terms of a governance point of view. So is that a council, do you see that as being a council-wide issue? Because it'd be, yeah, I don't know whether having a single whistleblowing process for social people services and then for the rest of the council. I just want to make sure that we're doing the right thing there. So
Yeah. So in respect of whistleblowing, you know, people should have the opportunity to be able to raise a concern when they can. In respect of children's, what the Ofsted have fed back is that should be investigated independently and not within house. So that's what we will do. So don't mark your own work, really.
Yeah. And there's some gaps in there as well. Obviously, you've replied to the email saying there's prioritisation going forward. But yeah, some of like Strandsea, is not been.
Sorry, what did you say? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Some of one of the sections there's not been started yet. It's quite a lot, and that's just because they're a lower priority, is that
So
right?
yeah, so in respect of the plan, it is a 3-year plan. So we've prioritised different areas of the plan, most typically theme A, and that is part of our monitoring visit. So we're already in a 10-day notice for a monitoring visit next week, of which where Ofsted will be here on the 27th and 28th of February. We recognise as a partnership we can't do all of this, you know, at the same time and at the same speed. The reality is we had an inspection in 2019, so 4 years on, we're not going to be able to make 7 months time frame and complete 4 years of work that needs doing basically. So the plan is to hold us to account, and there are some works that are starting. The papers before you today is updates until the end of December, because that's when the steering groups have been held. So some of the information that I've already been asked is they have been, you know, there are further updates since January and February, and that's part of my proposal today is regarding having a scrutiny. So there's an opportunity for challenge and scrutiny and celebration of the work, and it is timely that comes into members, and that you've all got a clear line of sight.
Thank you. I'll leave it.
Thank you. Councillor Grottek, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. I'd just like to say that I very much welcome being able to participate in the improvement board. Very much value the support of all our colleagues, and there is much work going on, as colleagues will have seen in all of the reports that Justine has put together. I would just say that while we're grateful for all the agency help that we currently have, it's not only a budget pressure, but it's an issue that we have, because what we really want to do as a key area is to stabilise the workforce, and some housing solutions that you will note within other papers should help with this. And I'd just like to emphasise to all our colleagues, especially those perhaps that are dialing in at the moment, and all of Justine's other colleagues, just how grateful we are not only for the support, but also that we want to work with you and help in any way we can. And that is a universal feeling around this table and from every member of this authority. We were disappointed with the result, but we've taken it on the chin. We understand that this is a long journey. We don't want to rush it. We want to get it right. Our children are the island's future, and we are totally committed to supporting you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roger, please.
Yeah, it would be remiss of me not to mention that I have personal experience of a lot of stuff that's in this report. I welcome the report. The inadequacies that have been identified are clear, and I have first-hand experience of that. But the report is welcome, and I wanted to say that the improvements that are being worked on very hard, as Councillor Grottek has just said, are starting to show through. And for that, I'm very grateful.
Thank you very much, Councillor Roger. Councillor Mumford, please.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Williams for that's a good idea. I will do that on this plan as substitute children for adults, and I'll get to work on that. Secondly, the scrutiny ones, yes, we've got that sorted, haven't we, Justine? Probably going to come to there won't be special ones, they'll come to our normal ones, unless there's a one that needs more time than maybe an hour. Thank you very much. I would just like to ask a few questions on the transition bit. I went to observe a meeting, which was very interesting. I'm trying to learn as much as I can before we get a inspection for adults. The only thing that worries me a bit about the transition is when these children at 16 go across the other side, do they actually meet the social worker that is going to be looking after them whilst they're on the mainland? Do they meet that social worker before they go to try and get some sort of relationship with them?
Okay, so in respect of a social worker, most children don't have a social worker when they transition. Okay, so only those children that are supported either under short breaks or a child in need. That's one of the roles that we're looking at regarding post-16 pastoral support. So there is lots of work regarding parental responsibility in ensuring where your child goes and the pastoral support. Myself and Councillor Williams and Russell Ashman met with parents last night regarding post-16 support, financial support. So we've got quite a lot of energy and enthusiasm in the room regarding looking at that support and going back to the Education and Skills Funding Agency and or the Education Minister, because we've also been speaking to Derek Thompson. So Thomas, so they don't have a social worker because our children are not children in care, or most of them are not supported. So we're looking at that role. It is a parent's responsibility. The local authority do not share parental responsibility. So therefore we do not have a say where children go or where they stay. We know it's a concern for parents. We're working with parents at how best to support children go into the mainland if that's what they want to do, or looking at options of whether they could stay here. Against any other local authority, most children transition 18 and support into adults. Here we need to look at children much earlier to see what support they need, whether it's with statutory services or supporting parents to make sure that they've got the right education and support that they need to do that. So it's within our plan, and it's not an easy nut to crack, this one.
So we don't have any say in their accommodation or anything. The parents are responsible for.
Correct. So we don't
Sorry.
As a council, we don't regulate any accommodation. So we don't oversee any accommodation. So that's why we would not recommend for a child to stay somewhere, because we don't oversee it and we don't regulate it.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I hope I shall be invited to more of your meetings. Thank you.
Very welcome.
Thank you. Could I have a proposer and a seconder for the adoption of this report, please? Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Roger. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And I would like to take the opportunity of thanking Justine and Councillor Williams for all their ongoing hard work in dealing with children's services. Thank you. Item 9 on our agenda is the planning application for Green Bay on Briar, and is in the hands of our officer Stella. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and morning members. Just by way of update, there is still no formal response from Historic England, so the recommendation remains unchanged. In terms of the proposal, this application defaults to full council, as it is the council's own development and classed as environmental impact assessment development. The application seeks to reinforce a section of dune at Green Bay Briar to improve flood protection and protect infrastructure. The proposals formed part of a wider project at 5 different sites on Briar, which was withdrawn in December 2023. And now solely focuses on works at Green Bay. The works will raise the height of the bank along a 75-metre length by up to 0.6 metres using a geobag core. This will be covered back over using materials excavated on site and will be left to revegetate naturally. Works are anticipated to be carried out over a period of 5 days in spring 24 to avoid impacts on amenity or tourism uses. A number of third parties have raised concerns relating to the principle of providing flood defences and potential impacts on landscape, amenity and the historic environment. However, no concerns have been raised by statutory consultees other than a holding objection from Historic England requesting more information on the delivery of materials via the Plan B haul route, which is from Church Quay along the beachfront, due to the presence of a number of historic heritage assets, including scheduled monuments along that route. This route will only be used if delivery by barge proves to not be feasible. Although formal comments are still awaited from Historic England, they have indicated informally that there is no objection to the proposed measures to protect heritage assets, including scheduled monuments. These, alongside the proposed measures set out in the Habitats Regulations Assessment and Environmental Statement to avoid adverse impact on protected sites and species, will be secured in a Construction and Environmental Management Plan under Condition 3. In summary, the proposed coastal defence works will provide enhanced protection for a vulnerable section of Briars Coast for a period of up to 25 years. The scheme complies with the requirements of the Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations and will conserve the landscape, seascape and scenic beauty of this part of the ONB and the undeveloped and special character of the heritage coast. It will also preserve the character of the conservation area and would not have an adverse effect on the integrity of the international designations on the basis of the avoidance and mitigation measures proposed. Whilst there will be a period of construction and associated disturbance, this is considered acceptable when weighed with the wider public benefits. It therefore accords with the relevant development plan policies and the NPPF. The application is therefore recommended for approval. The recommendation is that members delegate to the Chief Planning Officer the granting of planning permission for the reasons set out in the report, pending no objection response from Historic England and subject to the conditions set out in Appendix A, and that members delegate to the Chief Planning Officer any minor changes required to those conditions as a result of Historic England's response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stella. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, thank you, Stella, and welcome to, first of all, Council, and thank you for the report. I don't think that if members give their comments to the planning application, there's been a late representation from one of the residents of Briar. I wonder if the Chief Planning Officer could just maybe update members on that representation.
Yeah, so we had a late representation from a resident of Briar Boatyard. We went back to the applicant to clarify and assure that resident that the wider project does still take into account the critical issues that the overall project was trying to address back in 2022 when it was 5 sites. And I think it's a combination of the enhanced water that South West Water are going to be doing. So they're going to, the groundwater protection that was being protected on the East Coast as a result of the works isn't quite as critical because of the work South West Water are doing for desalination. And the works at Green Bay are still needed because there are more residents and businesses in that area, and the likelihood of overtopping is still an issue at that part of the island. But the rest of the project, because of the increasing costs, the work South West Water are doing and the potential conflict it was having with the residents of Briar, they scaled it back to just Green Bay. So, and they do intend to be mindful that this has the potential to interfere with the tourism season. So they are going to liaise with residents before they undertake the works. So that information has gone back out to that late representation.
Brilliant, thank you. So in terms of this planning application, I can't see any issue with it as long as the applicant makes sure they consult with the residents of the area. I would propose the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford, please.
Thankfully, it's just a query really. We are losing gradually due to erosion many of our historic sites like Kelp Pits down Banks Carn, and the Garrison Wall seems to be getting closer to the edge. Is it normal for councillors to be able to make a decision based on informal discussions with Historic England? I'm just a bit concerned that it was informal was the word used and not formal. I'm quite uncomfortable with the word informal.
Shall I come back on that?
Can I come back? Shall I answer that? Oh,
Thank you.
who would you like to respond? Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, apologies. I'll just make that clear. We have had so far we've had a formal response from Historic England, which is a holding objection requiring more information on the alternative haul route. Should the applicant not be able to deliver the materials by barge as is planned. So if that proves not possible, the alternative route is a haul route along the coast, where there are a number of scheduled monuments and other heritage assets. There was a holding objection from Historic England early on because they felt that there wasn't sufficient information to understand that those assets would be strongly protected. The applicant has provided further information. We are still waiting for a formal response from Historic England, but we have heard informally that the measures proposed are acceptable. So the recommendation is not that you approve the application today, but the members delegate to the Chief Planning Officer the granting of planning permission for the reasons set out of the report, but pending and subject to no objection response from Historic England, which we are still waiting on. Once that no objection, that formal no objection has been received, we would be in the position to proceed to issue a decision.
Okay, what if they don't come back and make a formal, we're happy with this? What if they say, actually, we reviewed this and we're still not happy? What happens then, Lisa? Because it's been delegated, if we pass it, it's been delegated to you to make the decision. But that's on the understanding that we have this agreement, informal agreement with Historic England.
Well, it's up to members if you want that report to come back. So if Historic England formally maintain that objection, do you want the report to come back? Or are you
How
happy?
significant is it?
So the
sites.
the alternative is we continue to negotiate with Historic England and with the applicant. We go back to the applicant to say they still got an objection. Is there anything more you can do to appease them, basically?
Are you able to help Dan on it?
But I mean, it's pretty clear. It says members delegate to the Chief Planning Officer the granting of planning permission for the reasons set out in the report pending no objections to historic. So if the Historic England come back and say we object, there's no granting of the application. That's what it reads to me about. So whether we negotiate more and keep it going longer, then that's up to.
And we could refuse it. So if ultimately Historic England's maintain that objection, that is a reason for refusal. It is the alternative backup route for the materials to come to the island. It's not the planned route. What they're saying is, if it came to it, we just need to factor in, we might not be able to get the materials to the quay. We might have to land it. And if we do land it, we know where these are and we're going to avoid them. And that's the detail that's gone back to Historic England, that we're waiting for them to say, okay, that's fine. If they still say, no, we still object, then we either refuse it or we continue to keep the application open until they have been satisfied.
I'd just like to bring Nicola in, please, on this.
Yeah, I'll stand corrected if Simon corrects me, but it's quite clear if the delegation cannot be used because it's a recommendation of refusal from the Historic England, it comes back to council. So it'd be come back to council for a matter to be further considered.
Thank you. That's really. And the other question I was going to ask is cost. How is this costed in? Is this covered in the budget that we allocated for Briar?
Can I just jump in there
Oh,
and say we're talking about the planning application rather than the budget? Yeah. So if that's all right, we'll move on.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Peacock, please.
Yeah, in recommendation number 2, it says members delegate to the Chief Planning Officer any minor changes. I just wonder, really, it's a question for Nicola, will there be any minor changes due to what happened on St Agnes? Because there was quite a significant change on St Agnes. And I just wonder if that would fall in as a minor change, or if something quite significant is changed, will that need to come back to full council? And what's a minor change, basically?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I can comment.
Nicola, do you want to come in?
Do you want me to
Well,
comment?
the minor changes relate to the conditions, not to the scale of the project.
Yeah, it's the wording of the conditions. So we would generally liaise with the lead member and say, are you happy with us making these minor changes to this condition?
heading with this is obviously there may well be some lessons learned from St Agnes, and it would be foolish if they didn't perhaps drop into this project if those lessons learned are quite obvious. It affects other projects while we're running along. Use of barges and everything.
Thank you. Councillor Roger, please.
Yeah, considering the cascade of objections from the Briar residents on the initial sea defence projects and the lack of this 3 in theory here, 4, it says to me that the residents of Briar are much happier with this piece of work than they were with the rest. I think there's 2 key things. One, we were talking about potential delays with regards to Historic England, and in here it says before the summer season of 2024. See, those negotiations can only delay this project. So I'd be keen to ensure those happen as soon as possible. So it doesn't end up right in the middle of the summer season this year. And I think that's a very important point to keep in mind. That considered, I'd happily second the proposal.
Thank you very much. So we have a proposer and a seconder for these recommendations. Could I have a show of hands, please, as to support for that? That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much, Stella. Item 10 on our agenda is the planning application for Selina McFarlane's Down St Mary's, which I believe in the hand is in the hands of Philippa, planning officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. The proposal at Selina is for the change of use of an existing workshop to residential accommodation for locally employed persons. In addition to the change of use, the proposal would include the erection of a small extension to the front northeastern elevation to provide a laundry and bin storage to serve the existing self-catering unit at Selina, and the erection of a carport canopy. The building would also be upgraded to meet building regulations, and measures for rainwater harvesting would be installed. Windows and doors would also be installed. There would be no alteration to the existing pedestrian or vehicular access. No concerns have been raised by environmental services with regard to highways impacts. The principle of converting an existing workshop to residential accommodation is considered acceptable, and the applicant has agreed to enter into a Section 106 agreement to secure the accommodation for local occupation, not for use as a holiday let or second home. For the reasons set out on the agenda report, the application is considered acceptable. Subject to the conditions set out and the completion of the Section 106 agreement, the application is recommended for approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa. Councillor Marcus, please.
Thank you, Philippa. Yeah, I have great, a 106 property, brilliant. Yes, please. Those recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Dean.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm delighted they're doing this, and I'll second the proposal.
Thank you very much. Councillor Roger.
Yes, I am in favour of this, but Section 106, historically, Section 106s have not ended up being the purpose that they're set. How are we now in a place where we can absolutely ensure that's not the case going forward?
I can only say that that is our strongest mechanism for controlling stock of housing. There is nothing higher. So it is a case of being made aware when these properties are being used in contrary to their Section 106. If we're not made aware and there's no harm arising, there's nothing we can do.
Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, well, I guess that's about enforcement and members following policy as well, and making sure that we're consistent and proportionate on the decisions that we make.
Thank you. So we have a proposer and seconder for these recommendation or the recommendation. All those in favour, please. Thank you. That's carried. And thank you, Philippa, for your report. Item 11 on our agenda is the council budget 24-25 and the council setting 24-25 a medium-term financial plan from 24 to 27 in the hands of Russell, our 15 officer, and CEO. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's the time of the year again where we set the council's budget for the next 12 months and set our financial strategy, our indicative financial strategy for the next 3 years. Report sets that out today for you. It's quite a long report. I'll take you through what I think are the key points, and then I'll take questions. First up, I would say that in terms of the overarching environment that we're living in these days, I think that what we've learned over the last 3 or 4 years is that what happens around the world does have a direct impact on the cost and how we deliver our services on the island. I think that's something that continually comes through on a regular basis, and as we know that we had obviously the COVID issue, then we had the war in Ukraine, and now there are other issues around the world which are all fueling what the cost of services and goods are to the council, and we have to be very wary of these world events now. They do have an impact on our financial affairs. So putting that in mind, that as we all know, there are still a number of large world events happening. There is also uncertainty around some of the financial planning we do in having to allow for that. Also, since we set the budget 12 months ago and our financial plans 12 months ago, the Levelling Up Bill has finally passed through the Commons and become law. It was much later than anticipated, and we've had to adjust our financial plan, and you'll see a change in the recommendations from last year to reflect that we've had to delay the implementing the increases in second homes and the premium on second homes for council tax, but that has now become law, so we can actually plan for that with more certainty going forward. I think when we're setting the budget, and we brought the report to you last month, you cannot ignore the fact that we have financial pressures in the current year, significant overspend, mainly driven by a couple of reasons. One is obviously the airport, the reduction or significant reduction in the activity at the airport is causing a significant budget pressure going forward, and we are spending a lot of money on agency staff in both the children's and adult services to cover vacant posts and cover long-term sickness. Now, in terms of the latter, the long-term sickness and the interim posts, we are looking to address that fairly quickly, and hopefully that will not be an ongoing pressure into next year for the whole year. In terms of the airport, the report will address how to deal with that, but we do have to deal with that to make sure that it's not an ongoing pressure. Otherwise, we will have an unbalanced budget going forward. In the Chancellor's announcement in November, there was very little in for local government. Usually some years there's a significant section on local government funding, but there was very little this year, just reiterating statements made 12 months previous on money that would be coming to the local government in the second year of the spending review. So there was very little change there. The financial settlement eventually was a reasonably good settlement for the council. The first provisional settlement was not so good. We did then contact the government, and then we got an uplift in the settlement, which means that overall it can be considered a good settlement. I think there are, it does feel a bit bleak in sometimes, but there is some good news going on. We've got some very big projects which are all coming to fruition in the next 12 months. That does bring risk, but there is a significant investment that is going to be going on over the next couple of years on the island, including our schemes, i.e. like the Culture and Museum Centre. We now have the Integrated Health Hub looking like it's going to be a real project at long last, and there is significant investment by South West Water and Western Power Plant. And on top of that, we've had the announcement that the Duchy are looking to build some new houses. So significant investment into the island, into infrastructure, which is a really good news item. We've already seen the report from Justine this morning, but again, the budget cannot be set without reflection on the Ofsted report and the inspection outcomes. We have built additional funding into the budget over the next 2 years, funding it from reserves to help address the improvements needed. So we have taken action in terms of the budget, and the budget does link to the council's critical plans to address the Ofsted inspection outcome. Transport, Chairman's announcement already today, but obviously bearing in mind we've set in the budget and looking at our financial plans, the issue around transport and the cost of transport to and from the islands and between the islands will be an ongoing issue through the life of this financial plan. And obviously we need to carefully monitor that and engage as council so wish to. But as I say, you cannot set the financial plan without knowing that is sat there in the background. In terms of our overarching principles in setting the budget, they are based around no cuts to frontline services. We still can continue with the most generous support we possibly can in the council tax support scheme. We have still got a hardship scheme top of that for households for council tax support. We've still got a significant programme to improve the quality of social housing stock. We have a principle that the airport subsidy does not increase from what we're already subsidising it to, so that it has to maintain that position and the subsidy does not increase. We're providing significant investment in council assets, in particular Park House. We ensure that those who should pay do pay, and that is twofold in that you'll see later probably discussions around it, but items like trade waste, etc., we need to make sure those who are traders do pay, etc., and they do pay the proper cost. And we also need to make sure that people who are claiming council tax benefits are those who are entitled to council tax benefits. So that's a sort of principle that we have. We continue with those going forward. And that we'll introduce the second homes council tax premium at the earliest opportunity, which will now be April 25. So those are the underlying principles. There is linkage through, as you go through from page 120 to how this links through to the corporate plan. There is a link, which is what there should be with your financial planning. That is set out there for you. And so that's the overview. I will run very quickly through the numbers because I think you can read the tables for yourself. But if I get to page 126, you'll see that the main resources that we get are council tax, business rates and government grants. We've set out our allocations that we have got for 24-25 and our estimate for 25-26 onwards in the table in section 2.2. You will see that all are going up. Business rates we have, we don't control as a council. Business rates are set by the government, and any reliefs we get compensated for through section 31 grants. So what we do is retain 50% of the business rates that we collect as a method of funding us, which central government control. Council tax. The council tax base, which is the number of houses that we can charge council tax on, has gone up in 24-25. Isn't because we got significantly 10 extra houses. It's due to a reduction in the number of people who are claiming council tax support or the level of council tax support. So that has helped increase the base. We're assuming that we will get some increase in the base going forward through the new houses, either from the Duchy or from our own developments in the last year of the financial plan. In terms of council tax, we are limited to the increase that we can put in. The increase that we can put in is set in a government legislation. It is being set at 5% for 24-25, and our proposal is to go up to the limit of 4.99%. You will see that there are graphs showing that we still are one of the lowest council tax charges in the southwest and in the country. There are some obviously lower in London where business rate take is very, very significant. And obviously that helps to subsidise their council tax, but is in comparison to shires and counties, we are one of the lowest council taxes in the country. And that's before you even think about the parish and town council precepts that exist elsewhere, which don't exist on the islands. As I said, the increase will be 4.99. That is not only is that the proposal in the budget, that is the figure that the government have assumed we will increase council tax by when they calculate how much grant they provide us. So they assume that you will go up to 4.99. If you choose not to go to 4.99, that is a member decision to reduce your available resources. The government will not provide additional resources to subsidise the fact that you have not increased council tax to the limit that you're allowed to. The council tax requirement is set out in the table. Again, I'm not going to read that through the numbers, etc., but it's set out there, as I said, and the council tax base has increased. That does give us a little bit of upside. Premiums that we can now implement from 2025, both on council second homes and empty homes. The proposals are set out in the report to do that. Particularly the empty homes ones is an incentive to try and bring houses back into use. Obviously, as we've got a housing crisis, I think we need to accept that recommendation and move in as quickly as we can with implementing any changes in empty home premiums. The collection funds is a method that measures how we collect council tax against how we use it. You can end up with a surplus or a deficit. There is a very, very small surplus at the moment, nothing to worry about, but it means that our collection rates, both in council tax and business rates, are holding up well, which is really, really good and gives us some good security and robustness going forward in terms of our predictions for the level of council tax and business rates that we have available to use. In terms of government grants, they came through. The initial allocation came through relatively as expected, as planned, although there was a significant reduction in the services grant, both to us and across the whole country. Ours has now been topped up by a sum of 150,000 to put that back up to a level slightly more than significantly more than we were predicting. And that was due to the work that we carried out with the Isle of Wight on island funding. So we have had a small acceptance, a very modest acceptance of additional allocation because of being an island. So hopefully that starts the process that we can take going forward in terms of you've recognised that additional funding is needed. We don't believe the amount that you've allocated is anywhere near the level that we need, but thank you very much that you've accepted there is a case there now. So it's good news in that terms, slightly not so good news in terms that the allocation wasn't as significant as we would have hoped for. We do get other sources of funding to support the budget, and you can't get away from it. They are becoming quite significant. We do get some specific grants for governments. The biggest ones are set out in Table 8. They're mainly around public health and education and children's services. We estimate what we think they were going to be going forward in our financial plans. Again, slight increase in public health, but a relatively small increase compared with inflation. And we're assuming that the Arthur City education grant will stay flat at the moment until we have those negotiations to see what the actual final figure will be, because part of it is based on actual activity. So that brings to the point of the total resources. I perhaps should have covered that we're assuming that fees and charges will go up by 3.5% to allow for the cost of inflation. That 3.5% is an estimate of inflation over the next 12 months. There are some instances where rate increases will be higher, the airport being one, to ensure that we maintain no further subsidy in the airport. And there will be others to ensure that, as I said earlier on trade waste, that those who should pay do pay. In terms of expenditure, as normal, when we look at the budget, we look at how much we're spending this year. What are our new pressures going forward? They're all set out there in a table 10. There's obviously always are a significant number of pressures, but you'll see that the big numbers are ones I've already mentioned: airport and children's social care. Those are the ones that are really increasing the spend that we've got to commit to going forward and find a way of funding. In terms of looking at those, we then look at how can we make savings in services. That's set out in table 11. So in terms of addressing some of those budget pressures, we have identified a series of savings that help offset that. So the combination of additional funding, additional council tax, and the savings help balance the budget. You'll see that we have RAG rated our savings. At the moment, most of the savings, all the savings are RAG rated green. They're relatively low risk. They may change as we go through the process, but at the moment, I think they're all deliverable. There are no amber or red rated savings. We still have a number of significant projects that are all set out in table 12, which obviously ensures that our financial plan is trying to deliver what the corporate plan says. You see that we've got money for planning skills, we've got the transport project, the cultural centre and museum project still ongoing over the next 2 or 3 years. There's also a table to say how it shows it links into the council's key objectives in the corporate plan. The summary budget position is quite an important table on 13 that says this is how it all pulls together and just confirms what I just said about savings, additional funding, and the additional budget pressures, how it all comes together to deliver a balanced budget, which is what we're recommending today. That balanced budget does need to use £328,000 worth of reserves in the first year, £135,000 worth of reserves in the second year, but by third year, no reserves. So we're not setting a financial plan that draws on reserves on a continual basis. We're using the reserves in the early years to smooth the budget because of, one, the delay in the second homes premium on council tax, and two, that we've got other savings coming in the second year of the plan. So it wouldn't be right to deliver one-off savings, which then have to be re-implemented in the second year. So we're using reserves to smooth it. The extra funding that we got from central government, we have put into contingency because we are carrying a significant amount of risk at the moment going forward in children's services, adult services. As I said earlier, we think that we're going to address and bring the spend under control in terms of agency staff, but there is still a risk around that. Plus, I am fairly sure that through the children improvement journey, we will identify further investment that will be required to help address some of the issues. So I'm proposing that we put that in the contingency at the moment. Council reserves are set out there. You will see that council reserves have reduced over the last 12 months. That was a conscious decision. We did say that we would invest some of the general fund reserve to try and address the housing issue for key staff, which we've done. You approved that in the capital programme earlier in 23-24. So that has reduced the general fund reserve. We will have to use some of the transport reserve and park house reserve to fund the budget pressures we got in year around the airport and agency staff. And we've used some of the grant reserves, which are ones that usually just wash through anyway, but they come in and they are spent over a number of years, and we're starting to spend some of those now. Our reserves do reduce over the next 3 or 4 years, but the general fund reserve still retains at a level over £2 million. And from section 151 perspective set out in table 16, those are the risks that I think the council is exposed to, and the value and a value put on them, and that comes to £2 million. So that is why my red line in terms of the general fund reserve is £2 million, because I think there are a significant number of risks that come to £2 million. So if we start having a general fund reserve below that, we start running the risk that we end up with insignificant reserves to meet risks going forward. The report also sets out the capital programme. Table 17 sets out a proposal for a number of new additions to the capital programme. A lot of them are around operational type services that we're doing, not the operational services as you know them, but replacing assets that we've got either in operational services, in the waste service, in the airport, etc. So they're all being built in. There is an allocation for play parks, which we see the pressure there that needs to be addressed. More energy efficiency work in houses. So they're all being built into the capital programme, which is set out there on table 18, which is the existing capital programme plus the new additions. It's a significant capital programme because also in addition there, provisionally the museum project has been built in. Final approval of that will come to March full council, so that isn't being approved today, but it's in our financial planning, as it would be rather remiss of us not to reflect probably the largest capital scheme this council will have ever done in our 3-year financial plan, just based on it's not being approved for another month. So we put that in the plan, so at least all our financial planning and our returns to central government on our planning look realistic. We also have a treasury management strategy that sets out our plans around how we manage the council's cash in terms of borrowing and investments. I won't go into that, it's set out there. It's a statutory document that we have to produce, but we will be taking out further long-term borrowing probably at the end of 24-25. We've managed to fund a lot of our capital programme borrowing requirements from internal cash in the short term, but as we run down reserves, that won't be possible, and we'll have to take out that longer term debt to normalise the situation again. Council tax levels, this report also sets out in table 19 and there's in the recommendations a series of statutory recommendations around council tax, and that includes setting the level of council tax for the Devon and Cornwall Police and Crime Commissioner, as I say, because they do precept on us, and that is set out in table 19. There's commentary from section 151 around risks. I think I've mentioned a lot of the risks in going through this report. These are the risks that I think that we have in terms of setting our financial strategy. We've got the airport is also a risk. Transport is always a risk. Large projects, very, very welcome, but they do come with a risk as well that we have to ensure that we're very, very aware of. Overspends in large capital projects are quite common in the public sector, so awareness of that and putting the right project management in place to try and negate that is an essential part of our planning for the next 12 months. But as I say, it's all set out there by statutory commentary. I'll leave it at that because it's probably gone on far too long already. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Councillor Grottek, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks are due to our Chief Executive and 151 Officer for this comprehensive budget report, but thanks also to the wider finance team and all our budget holders who have helped to present this balanced budget that is before you today. Members will be aware that for some time there has been an expectation from central government that local authorities will do more with less funding. In the face of these challenges, much work has been done to emphasise that as the smallest unitary authority with the widest remit, this council looks for a longer-term fair funding settlement to reflect the extra costs involved in delivering services in an island community and also to plan more easily for the future. The transport grant recognised this, and I would mention that it is profoundly sad to lose it. Work will continue. As members know, and the 151 officer has emphasised, our extended remit includes the running of an airport and the running of a residential care home. Both of these, as the report notes, create present budget challenges and planning for the future challenges, as does the improvement work necessary in children's services and adult social care, which of course members strongly support. There are some difficult decisions to make, But as the report notes, council tax and fees and charges must be levied to reflect costs and service needs, using some reserves in the short term. We must support to finish running our council in a business-like manner to deliver the services our community needs and to be able to show government that we have set a balanced budget using the rules and protocols they have set, which I hope you will all feel able to support this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All quiet on the Western Front.
Sorry.
Councillor Marcus, please.
In the risks to, where is it, table? We talk about the risks to the reserves. You've talked about a reduction in airport fees, airport movements.
Yeah.
Risk at 1.4 million or something. Potential risk. What is that? How did you come to that number?
To get to the table, it is calculation of probability that further reductions in airport numbers will continue. We've reset the level of airport fees, which will be covered in a report later on this agenda. It's based and the budget is based upon an estimate of activity through the airport, not dissimilar to the current year, but the trend over the last 3 or 4 years has seen a reduction year on year. If that trend continues or even accelerates for any particular reason, whether it's weather driven or operational issues or competition issues, there is a risk, and that is identified as a risk that we would have to fund in the first instance from reserves. So there's an estimate of what that would actually calculate. So the calculation is, the total level of income is 1.8%. If there was a further 15% reduction, then it would be about 277,000. That's quite similar to what we've seen year on year. We've set the budget, as I say, based on hoping that the existing numbers continue as they did for the last 12 months, and some of the reduction is one-off, which is what the operators have been telling us. I'm also flagging up that may not be the case, and the trend may continue.
Sure. Yeah, I just want to make sure, because again, we're raising council tax again by 5%, and we need to be justified to the residents so we can actually justify that 5% increase. And I know that everyone's saying we're going to have to. There's a expectation from central government that we do increase by 5%, but it's just I can't quite get in my head how to express frustration at the movement from central taxation to personal taxation, and how people are suffering because of it.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock, please.
A couple of queries, Russell. We did hear earlier in the meeting there's a possibility of an Ofsted for adults, but you have a fairly low risk on your risk table. If we were to have a, I don't want to say the word damning, but if we have a worse Ofsted than we anticipate, because who knows whatever Ofsted can dream up at times, as we found over Children's, would that risk increase? And would be my worry is it's quite a big figure in the potential magnitude, 1.3 as quoted. How close will we get to that if we have a significant increased risk of a poor Ofsted? Thinking about agency staff and everything else that we're talking about.
Yeah, in here it's really the risk table looks at increased costs in adult social care around struggling to deliver the staffing requirements to keep the care home functioning within the legal framework. There's no allowance here, and I think it would be a slightly, I don't know whether it's a perverse allowance, saying that, and it's CQC, not Ofsted, by the way, but the CQC report, we are making budgetary allowance for a negative CQC report. I think would not be appropriate for the authority.
Except it's not appropriate. I'm just asking the question, should it happen, bearing in mind?
If it happens, then you can see the implications already from the children's one, where it will require investment. It will change our financial plans. It is likely it will be in 25, 26 onwards by the time, if they turn up in the next 6 months, by the time we get an improvement plan and look at the resources, it's more going to hit 25, 26, I would suggest. But you can see there is a cost that comes, as Councillor Williams said earlier, there is a cost that comes with having a poor outcome from an inspection, and it is not insignificant.
Would we anticipate some money coming in from central government to cover some of that cost, or would that fall generally to us?
Central government don't provide specific, they do it through providing some services and extra support through either the LGA or improvement partners who work for the government. So they put improvement partners in and they pay for those rather than we pay.
Right. Final one, so just very briefly, just for clarification really, point 13 of your recommendations that we're charging change from 50 to a 100% premium for properties which have been empty. I assume in the sense of a, try not to say duchy, but in the sense of a private landlord, that those costs fall to the private landlord. Is that correct?
Yeah, the recommendations around empty properties are in two of the recommendations. From 25, we can increase it further, but we can from April 24, we can move from 50 to 100, which we're proposing to do. The government are pushing for that. You'll see that Secretary of State Michael Gove even announced it in the last couple of weeks. It's one of the tools we've got to try and address the housing crisis that's around. There are around both locally, on city and nationally, a significant number of empty homes, and the government is allowing tools to try and put a premium on to try and act as an incentive to bring empty homes back into use quicker than they would do otherwise.
Yeah, because my next question was going to be, can we go beyond that 100% premium?
Not for 24, but you can for 25, and that's set in proposal 12, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, thanks. I guess one of the only saving graces is the increase in council taxes below inflation. I don't think anyone, it seems like we've done this every year that I've been involved. And some years it's been way below inflation, but this year it's above, but it just seems to be standard. We have a discussion and go with the maximum. That seems to be our convention, which is where we find ourselves. I'm pleased the discussion around some of the airport complications is becoming more in the open. It seems to have been something which we've spoken about in private session more than in public session. I don't think it does any harm for the community to understand some of the challenges we face. We can't necessarily afford an airport. We can't necessarily live without an airport. So we'll perhaps talk more in fees and charges about some of those aspects. I'd be interested in the uptake on the council tax support scheme, whether we are actually supporting people, whether they know about it, whether we can do more to promote that. There was reference in your notes to do with the integrated health and social care project, so I look forward in the coming 12 months to hearing more about options for the current Park House building if all goes to plan with the redevelopment we're talking about. I'd also like us to, in the next 12 months, review our public health grant. I know you and I have exchanged emails this week about smoking cessation services and negotiations. We've hit a bit of a brick wall on that, and that just seems to contradict all the discussions I have when I'm at Health and Wellbeing Board or Integrated Care Partnership. We're trying to keep the population of the country healthy by being proactive and preventative. So to be cutting services like smoking cessation or putting them at risk seems to, as I said, be contradicting a lot of that. And then I'm also aware that lots of authorities with far more financial influence than us are facing real challenges and hardship. So the tone I get from what your report is saying is that we're in a pretty sensitive position at the moment. We don't need things to swing particularly one way or the other before things start to either be give us a bit more breathing room or become pretty critical. So it all seemed very sensitive and in need of extra vigilance, but I hope it swings in a positive direction rather than the discussion where we have to think about frontline services, which you didn't need to scratch too far below the surface today to feel that could be something in the near future.
I mean, I will just make one comment back on what Councillor Williams has said, that the council is in a relatively strong position financially, particularly from where we were a number of years ago. But you'll see that local authority spending, which sometimes local authorities are nowhere near the sort of national news. It might be in the local authority press, but you'll see that national news, there's council after council coming out with potential bankruptcies, I think even last week, first or second item on the sort of 10 o'clock national news is about Birmingham City Council making hundreds of £millions worth of savings, staff savings. They're cutting back on adult care, they're cutting back on children care, they're cutting complete services out. We're not in that position, I think, so we need to be thankful we're not in that position. But it does need that careful monitoring to ensure it just goes to show that those authorities, if you go in the wrong direction, it can lead to quite a catastrophic impact on the services for the residents in their area.
Thank you very much. Do I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Thank you. Sorry to do this. Is yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I have a proposer in Councillor Grottick and seconder Councillor Sims. We will ask you all individually to state your name if you are for the approval of this budget setting and medium-term financial plan. There are 13 recommendations which we will take together. So I will go round individually. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Francis Grottick, I support all of the recommendations, Chair.
Councillor Sims.
Councillor Sims, for.
Councillor Roger.
Councillor Roger, for.
Councillor Mumford.
Councillor Mumford, for.
Councillor Marcus.
Councillor Marcus, for.
Councillor Dean.
Councillor Dean, for.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Councillor Bedford.
Councillor Bedford, for.
Councillor Guy.
Councillor Guy, for.
Councillor Peacock.
Councillor Peacock, for.
Councillor Watt.
Councillor Watt, for.
Councillor Francis, for. And Councillor Legg. Right.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Legg, I would be for if I were in the room and were able to vote.
And Councillor Dugan.
Yes, I'm for. Yep.
But I know you can't vote, but it's good to know that you're all supportive. So that's unanimous, and thank you very much. And thank you, Russell, for all your hard work on this as usual. We move on now to item 12 on our agenda, which is the fees and charges for the period 1st of April 24 to 31st of March 25, which is also in your hands, Russell.
Yeah, the fees and charges that accompany the budget setting are set out for you in the papers from page 189 onwards. The proposed fees, as I said, are generally going to increase by 3.5% across the board, unless there's an exceptional circumstances. That would either be because there's an increase that needs to be implemented, which is higher or less than 3.5, or it's a statutory set fee, which is set by central government. They are all set out for you in the tables there, but I would just pick out that obviously the exceptions here are the airport, where we're proposing an increase of 18%. That's obviously a significant percentage in terms of a percentage figure. We have put out a report that will equate to approximately £3 per journey for people using the service. That is probably equivalent to about 3.5% on the actual ticket price. ticket prices we know have gone up quite significantly. How much has been allowed for by the operators, we're unsure of. But I'm sure obviously operators will probably saying that it probably will have been less, but that is what we need to deliver our financial strategy. The only other option around that is you cut other services to subsidise the airport. Therefore, with our principle that those who should pay do pay, and the principle that the airport does not increase its deficit and its subsidy from the airport, unfortunately, that is the level of fee that needs to be increased. I think it's probably worth mentioning also that if further work is carried out, and obviously we're going to bring a further report to March full council about how will we address the transport issues for the island, when we're actually in discussion with central government about looking at subsidies, etc. If your airport charges, if you've got a hidden subsidy from the council, that won't help us, because that could get baked in to any help from central government. They will bake in the fact that you've already put a subsidy in. So one of the reasons for increasing the charges is if we didn't increase those charges and we took it from council resources, and we would have to find a service to cut to do that, which is not actually that easy, as we would know. But even if you did that, the risk is if we ever got future government support, they would assume that you will continue forever with that level of subsidy in that financial plan. So to say the lesson learnt, and I have been involved in doing that on other airports, is you need your fees and charges to reflect your cost, because they will use your fees and charges as your proxy for cost in terms of looking at any level of subsidy in the future. I think there are other increases here, and I know that members want to discuss the increases in trade waste charges. Rebecca is here to help if we've got any questions, but we did set the policy last year that we would ensure that the people who received trade waste services, first of all, we identified the ones who should pay to ensure that they were paying and they weren't receiving a domestic waste service free of charge, that they were paying for trade waste, and two, that we made the trade waste charges or start putting trade waste charges up such that they recover the actual cost to the authority, and that we don't subsidise trade waste from other council services. So those are the reasons for the increase in the fees. I know that councillors do want to have a further look at that, and we'll take that in the discussion in a minute. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Russell. All quiet again. Councillor Peacock.
Just a query really, looking at the airport before we start talking about waste, but looking at the airport, why are the fees for private aircraft at 9% and commercial aircraft 18%? Would it not be more equitable for it to be 18% for everybody?
We could do that. I think that we look at the chart. We split the charges at the airport between the commercial operations and the other operations, including private and including the various charges for rental of space, etc. The 9% was just deemed to be appropriate one. I think we're trying to attract some additional activity as well. So one of the reasons was that we didn't want to put the charges up too much. If you want to put a proposal in, I don't think anyone would argue putting it up to 18%. There's also been discussions that can we keep that slightly lower to try and attract additional activity. I think lowering our key commercial ones is not going to attract additional activity, but private could.
Furthermore, there's a fee for advertising. I'm not aware of any advertising taking place at the moment.
I can't comment whether there is any, but obviously it's our set of fees and charges such that we have a published set of fees and charges which are approved by members, and if somebody comes along and asks to do advertising, we have a set fee that we can charge them which has been approved, and all charges that are levied by local authorities have to be approved by the elected members. They cannot be set by officers.
And that's at 3.5%, not 18%.
Thank you. Councillor Dugan.
Yes, the airport increase in landing charges, the taxes effectively. I'm completely against that. I think it's for the last 18 months. I find it hypocritical because the last 18 months we've been lambasting the steamship company for borrowing money for the new sea link and possibly increasing transport costs by 5% over inflation. And here we are proposing a 4.5 times inflation rate on landing costs. This is on top of 26 percentage points that we've raised it over the last 4 years. And as we've just mentioned earlier in this meeting, that over the last 3 and 4 years that there's been a diminishing return in passengers. We all agree to that. Now, surely that has some bearing in the gradual increase of landing costs. I find this to be very short-term financial economics, really. It's and to have children's social care and adult social care held up in one hand as a threat and a cup of coffee in the other hand to get us to vote for the 18%, which is, again, I'll repeat, 4.5 times the rate of inflation, is not acceptable. Also, at some point, we may possibly have to go to the government for public service obligation funding for the route, where they may be asked to financially support any potential new air operator. And we've been complaining to the government, as well as the residents and the steamship company, for the last year and a half about the possible increase that the steamship company are going to levy on this council by their borrowing. And yet we'll have to go cap in hand to the government and say, we put up landing fees by 18%. Can you please financially support any new operator? You know, and we seem to have a great expertise on the council in all sorts of areas. You know, we've got hotel managers here, we've got painter and decorators, I grow vegetables, we've got pre-butchers, people who worked in healthcare, but we have nobody on the council that's worked for an airline or managed an airport before. And I think it would be prudent if we, similar to building a new museum or new housing estate for housing, we get in expertise, we're getting consultants, architects, designers. But it seems with the airport, all we seem to do is year on year, the footfall diminishes, so we whack up the landing fees. You know, you don't increase footfall in a diminishing business by increasing the cost to the customers. That will just lead to more a downward spiral of fewer and fewer passengers. Also, that, you know, if we got some experts on board that might have some sort of marketing expertise on how to make the airport pay, and I can't see why we can't have a sliding scale of landing fees. Maybe in the winter, reduced landing fees so residents can get away more cheaply without being penalised by this tax. If I was present in the council, and I can't because of the weather, I would be proposing a 5% increase in line with inflation for landing fees. And I'll be proposing that we seek somebody with professional advice on how to run airlines and airports to help us in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Grotton, I think you're going to come back on this.
Sorry, could people just
turn your lights off?
Just for a minute while I make a quick comment. I'd just like to remind Councillor Tobin Dugan that members have a responsibility to set a balanced budget. You have just, although you're not physically in the room, you have just voted for that balanced budget. That balanced budget accepted the need to increase the airport fees. And I don't know if you've got a pen handy, but the 151 officer has clearly explained, reference page 118, paragraph 1.5, the rationale behind the necessary rise in airport fees. And also you may find helpful page 146, para 13.3, which will set this within the general context. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Roger, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. think everyone knows my thoughts about increasing the fares, landing fares at the airport. However, I have, thank you, Chief Executive and others for detailed information with regards to why this has to happen, and I accept that. I welcome that we have a special transport paper coming to March full council, and hopefully within that is a once and for all root and branch discussion, recommendations on how we can assist this airport situation going forward. Specifically, yeah, I think Tesco was built on every penny counts, and I think the airport could maybe benefit from that type of attitude. Councillor Peacock mentioned advertising. I mean, if there is to be advertising at the airport, which I think is probably very acceptable and could be a source of income, the fees and charges in here are paltry compared to, say, what we pay our operators to advertise at our other airports. So I think that needs to change. I also noticed the airport operator parking space, airport shuttle bus operator fees there. Is the reason we don't charge the electric vehicles for their static car parking places at the airport? They have become commercial. I know that the operator paying for the parking spaces as detailed here loses business to the electric vehicles now because they are hired on a commercial basis. So I would have thought they should be brought in line with what the main transport operator is paying there. I'd be grateful if that could be looked into. Other than that, it says with a heavy heart that I will agree to the fees and charges being set, but we must once and for all look at how we can alleviate this issue going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Guy, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Rogers stole a bit of my thunder there. And is there an answer why the electric cars aren't being charged?
No, I think it's something we can have a look into. The car parking generally is something that members have asked for up at the airport. There are several issues there. It is one of the pieces of work that we will look forward to in the next 12 months of what we can do. Initially, when we looked at it some time ago, there is a significant investment needed to introduce car parking, then you have to enforce it. You need to think, probably, as mentioned, we probably need to get a little bit of clever thinking about how we can have cheap enforcement up there.
Appreciate that. Apologies for not attending many of the informals. Just one other thing while we're on the airport, there is a parking machine up there which cost the authority £6,000, brand new, still wrapped. If we do have a workshop and we don't implement parking, can we sell it, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford, please.
Thank you. And I want to pick up from what Councillor Marcus said about how the burden of personal tax is getting greater, and it really impacts on people that are on very fixed incomes. I've had quite a bit of representation from the public about the proposed increases in the airport charges, which I actually support on the recommendation. And one person put it very bluntly to me. They're a pensioner. They live on their own. They never use the plane, of course, unless it's a medical, of course. And so they're saying to me, why should their fixed income support people that can afford to use the plane back and forth, back and forth, back and forth? And they seem to think it's rather unfair. And I actually thought it was a very valid point, because I actually thought, well, when I go off the island, I use the boat and I'm not impoverished, but I think it was a very valid point that we're not hearing that hidden section of the population that actually can't afford now, to go on the plane or the helicopter, but they are, through their council tax, subsidising something which I thought Joel put very well. We can't afford to have, but we actually can't afford not to have. So I actually support the recommendation for the increase. There is one thing that worries me, though. I went to the workshop, I think, and my understanding is that for the helicopter to fly, it doesn't actually need an air traffic control, it can just land. If these increases come up and the helicopters decide they're only going to land on Tresco and ship their St Mary's or Briar or St Martin's customers to the other islands, how will that impact on the revenue for the airport?
Thank you, councillor. That particular question, if the helicopter operator decided to change their operations and only land at Tresco, then the number that we've allowed for, estimates that we've allowed for in landing at St Mary's would be a budget pressure. We would lose revenue. It's quite a significant amount of revenue, which is one of the reasons that element in risk analysis for the risk strategy in the budget. But it would reduce because the helicopters can go to Tresco. There's no charge we levy on helicopters that go to Tresco. They fly through our airspace. We have to control the airspace, but we cannot charge for that. So they could fly all to Tresco, and that would be a hit on an airport. Coming back to just quickly on the airport, I said we have had meetings about it. The issue is that the passenger numbers are gone over the last sort of 5 years, down from 95,000 down to under 70,000 now. Our costs have actually increased by slightly less than inflation. So our costs haven't gone up by higher than inflation, but they have not reduced by the level of activity that has reduced. And that's because the airport is still open from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock in the evening. Okay, the activity doesn't come through at lunchtime, etc. But the airport is still open. There is still a cost of it. You can't have an air traffic controller who only works 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon, I'm afraid. And that is the problem. It is a fixed cost. The driver is either a subsidy or putting through significantly more passengers. We've said in previous reports that the magic number to start making the airport look like it could pay for itself is usually about 100,000 passengers through it. When we were at 90 odd thousand, we were close to it. There was only a very small subsidy. Now it's dropped to 60,000. We've said that we don't want to increase any further subsidy into the airport, therefore the fees have to go up. It's purely a numbers game. There is a fixed cost of running a fixed wing airport.
Can I just come back? Thank you, Russell. Can we just clarify for the public that are listening to this debate that any funding for the airport from the government that comes through a service obligation order actually goes to the operator, you know, the people that operate the helicopter or the plane. It would not come to the council for running the airport. I think there's some confusion there. The public are saying, why can't the council get, you know, the grant? But doesn't it go to the operator like in Newquay?
Yeah, if you do a public service obligation under the standard public service obligation agreement, that is what happens. It's the airline that gets the subsidy. The airports that it serves, what they need to ensure, which is what I was recommended, is that their fees and charges reflect their cost. If you're subsidising it, then you will get no benefit. But if you're getting your full costs recovered through your fees and charges, then you are covered. But the PSO, that doesn't mean to say that work that the council would do, and to say this is subject to members giving that recommendation going forward in March. But I think we will be looking at every avenue to try and find support from government for transport across the whole, including either PSO or direct to the airport if the government are willing to look at it, as well as inter-island boating and everything. I think we need that bigger push at central government now, but that's the March paper.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Councillor Sims shortly, but I think Councillor Roger, you wanted to come back on this item.
I just want to come back to Councillor Anita on the Tresco situation. I don't think that would be the case. Tresco has what I believe is a planning restriction in place, the amount of landings it's allowed on a daily, weekly basis. And there's also the question of the added cost of boat transfers, which would be an even bigger negative impact on the consumer than it would be for the landing fees proposed here coming into St Mary's.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't see Councillor Legg on. I'll let you come in first, Harry, before I ask Councillor Sims as lead member for transport to wrap up on this. So, Councillor Legg.
I was going to come in on waste, so if you're going to Steve to wrap up on transport, that's fine by me.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sims,
No,
sorry to keep you waiting.
Thank you. Just one final point regarding Anita's thing. I think if Tresco did insist on going to the Prince Hans helicopters, insisted on only going to Tresco, they'd lose customers because there's a lot of people don't want to go to Tresco, they want to come to St Mary's. So I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think that we need to be very aware that Tresco helicopters, sorry, Prince Hans helicopters have had an enormous hit on our income at St Mary's Airport. Just regarding some of Toby's comments, I think this is really regrettable. We don't want to put up airport fees by 18%. However, we're not driving this. Every 1% the operators put on is 0.1% that we put on. It's 10 times the effect. So we're playing catch up. If the Exeter fares go up by 21%, we're going to get less people coming from Exeter landing at St Mary's Airport, and the only way we can compensate for that is to put up charges. We're not running the show on this really, so we're hostages to fortune. And again, if we don't put airport fees up by a sensible amount, then well, it's over to us to work out how we're going to finance that, and that's the bottom line here. And another thing I think which is really important to note, historically, since I've been on the council, we had been reluctant to put airport fees up by quite enough. And the early part, I was at the first 3 or 4 years, we put it up by 2 or 3%, and then it looked a bit stark, so we put it up by 15%. That was 8 times inflation at that point. And this just keeps going on and on and on. We sort of yo-yo back and forth. We need a consistent methodology for airport pricing. We also need to move away from setting our budgets according to the operators' expected numbers for the following year, because they always overshoot like mad. So we always end up under at a deficit. And also looking forward, we absolutely need to nest a reasonable increase in this year. And I think 18% is actually quite conservative. I think we justifiably gone a bit higher, but I think it's a reasonable figure. We have to nest this increase this year, because looking forward, it doesn't look good for the airport at all. We're going to get new vessels, or we're going to get another operator. Or anyway, something's going to happen. There's going to be a novelty factor on the sea links. And if you've got new ships there or a new operator, people are going to move away from the airlines and go by ship. So it's going to go down whatever way we look at it. And not prudently putting fees and charges up this year, I think it's just going to cause massive problems the following year. And if we did the same thing the following year, then at some point we're going to have to put up fares by 60-70%. You just can't keep putting this off. It's just a fact of life. So I'm very happy to propose, unless somebody else has something, or second if necessary.
Yes, I'll come to you, Councillor Marcus, in a minute, and Councillor Legg. I think Councillor Dugan wanted to come back, if it could be very brief, please, because you've already had a lot of floor.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I'll just repeat myself. You don't increase the footfall to a business by putting up the prices that a business charges. That's basic economics.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marcus, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, so speaking generally, it's fees and charges as a whole rather than just the airport, because I think that's a theme thing. Noticed that the waste charges and some of the environment section, the price increases are outbound and not by inflation only. So what I will propose is an amendment to the recommendation, and that's because there's a view that I think that Russell said in his statement at the start that members agreed last year that all services should wash their own face, should be commercial in outlook, i.e. not be subsidised by council taxpayers or business rate payers. That's the view of government at the moment and the view of members, which speaks to what Councillor Williams said earlier about being able to not being able to afford services, but not being able to not to afford services. I fear there's going to be a lot more pain involved in working out the subsidies that council tax and business rate payers are subsidising services on the island. I think there's going to be a lot of a lot of disagreement further on down the line as we try and disentangle subsidies. So what I'd like to propose is the environmental services fees and charges get deferred to next month. I don't mind the out of bound increases as such, but so long as we have evidence to propose that. With the airport, we had discussions previously, so I don't mind those 18% increases, but with the environmental services one, it's a bit out of the blue. I don't really, I mean, unless members want to discuss those charges, that's great, but I think they can be more discussed in detail when we have the evidence for those increases in a report that the officer has proposed to bring next month.
Thank you. I think that would be sensible, Councillor Marcus, because we've already spent a lot of time and we've got several agenda items yet to come. But just refer to Chief Executive a moment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The fees and charges obviously are set and feed into the budget process. In terms of deferring some of the charges that are sat in front of you, I don't have a problem if it's specifically for an area that we can address very quickly. I know that Waste are bringing a report, and I don't, Rebecca may comment on this in a minute, to March's full council based on the trade waste charges and our policy around trade waste charges. And I would be comfortable that we accept the charges here, and we accept the principle of charging the trade waste people what it costs, but the actual charges are subject to a further discussion and a further report in March. When you said the whole environment services, I'm slightly edgy on that because I'm not sure that report's coming back on a timely basis, and we would go past the 1st of April before anything happened.
I'll amend that to, so the proposal is that we accept the fees and charges for the waste service in principle, subject to a report coming to March. Full council.
Very happy with that.
Okay, thank you. At last, Councillor Legg, please.
Thank you. I think Councillor Marcus has more or less beaten me to it. I was only going to go slightly further and suggest that we get a date in the diary for a workshop when that report is ready for members' eyes, so we can discuss it thoroughly in a workshop and fully understand the implications, because it's not as straightforward as just the price of the waste. There's a lot more to it. So agree with what Councillor Marcus says, and if I were in the room would be seconding his proposal, but I'm not. Yeah, if we could get a date in the diary, presumably a week before or slightly more than a week before March full council for a workshop.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Legg. Rebecca, would you like to come in at all on this? No? Okay, thank you. So I have, first of all, this amendment to vote on put forward by Councillor Marcus, seconded by Councillor Mumford. All those in favour of the amendment, please. Yeah, that's carried. Thank you very much. So with that amendment, we will now, I need a proposer for the adoption of fees and charges, please. Could I have a proposer? Councillor Guy, seconded Councillor Grottick. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. So we move on now swiftly to item 13 on our agenda, the general fund account rent setting, which is in the hands of Rachel Guy. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Robert. Morning, members. So this is a general fund rent setting paper for the year 24-25. And as per the agreed previous increase with members in 2020, we're looking to increase this by CPI, which is 6.7% this year.
Thank you. Councillor Dean, please.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. We agreed this in, when was it, 2020, that it would just go up by CPI. That's what we're proposing. So I propose the proposal.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Guy. All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried.
I wanted to ask a
Sorry.
question. The figures, are they weekly or monthly? I'm assuming they're weekly.
They are weekly, yes.
Yeah, they are.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you for that report, Rachel. Quiet, please. Item 14 on our agenda is the social housing account rent setting. Again, in your hands, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, again, with the social rent setting, we're looking to follow government guidance on this one, and that's to increase by CPI plus 1%, which is a 7.7% increase on the social rents this year. We've also applied that to the social garages and the service charges as well to make sure that we're covering all of our costs for sort of management going forward this year. There's also a slight amendment to Appendix B, which I'd like to point out. The dates were slightly wrong in there, so it's just a correction of the dates to 24-25.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Councillor Grottick, please.
Yes, good morning. I think you may also like to look at paragraph 9 in the letter to tenants, because you will, I'm sure, appreciate that people here have great difficulty in taking any form to a bank at the moment. I suggest you amend the wording on that.
That's okay, Fran. We are onto that one, and the team now hold drop-in sessions and are supporting tenants through that. So we've got a full support system in place for our tenants to help them with that now.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dean, please.
Again, straightforward, following government advice and guidelines. So I will propose the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock,
Seconding
seconding.
the recommendation.
Thank you very much. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you,
Thank
Rachel,
you.
for your
Thank
reports.
you.
We move on now to item 15 on our agenda, which is the update on the local plan review preparation timetable in the hands of our Chief Planning Officer, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this report is to update members on a revised timetable for progressing the review of the local plan and associated planning documents. This timetable is required to be updated to reflect the timing of work so the community, interested parties and other organisations can be aware of times of consultation. You'll note the draft timetable, also known as the local development scheme, has already been sent to the Secretary of State as part of the requirements of a written ministerial statement that was issued last December. During 2024, officers will work on the monitoring report and towards the evidence base, as well as other pieces of work, including the housing needs survey and a review of the conservation area, including a review of island-wide Article 4 directions. And part of the review process will be to work with members to steer the local plan and any revision of its policies, and I'll be looking to re-establish the local plan working group to assist with this. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, no, it's really good to review the local plan and see the impact or not about how it's working. Yeah, looking forward to the review. I'll propose recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Watt, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The lead member for planning mentioned the other day at the informal meeting about Article 14 stuff, and also possibly changes because of the short-term letting legislation that may be coming in the future. I wonder if that is able to be built into the new plan.
Yes, Article 4, Lisa.
Yeah, Article 4 directions. Yeah, part of the review of the conservation area is to review those blanket Article 4 directions, and whether or not we need to include. It's only a suggestion at the moment. It's not actually coming into force, but do we need to consider that kind of changes of use? Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of what do we want to observe on the outer city? What are our compromises for development as well? So yeah, it's going to be a good piece of work.
Thank you. So I have a proposer for the recommendations here, and seconded by Councillor Grottick. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you very much, and thank you, Lisa. So item 16 on our agenda is the council performance summary for Q3 in the hands of Tom Walton. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Chairman. The council performance summary for the quarter three, which is October, November, December of 2023, is included Appendix A of this report. The recommendation is that members note the performance summary for this quarter. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Marcus.
Should I just ask, airport passenger numbers, are they not in here? I can list lines.
Yeah, the airport passenger numbers were reported to you in January as part of the finance report. They're in there. There's a table and a graph that does that. I think we leave it in there so we don't duplicate it. It's a question going forward whether we do or don't duplicate it in the performance report and the finance report.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford, please.
Just a quick query, page 269, quarter 3, there's no numbers for adult social care assessment and reviews completed within the statutory time frame. And on page 5, about adult social care, there was once again, where is this information, adult social care assessment and reviews? Tom?
I mean, we can only report on the information we receive back, so it's possible that that will come back in Q4, but the request goes out to all of the relevant departments.
It's quite obvious that everybody else was given information, but that one service, which I think is actually quite important, really. In fact, all of it is important, but I would have been interested in having those figures, please.
Thank you. Chief Executive. Could we have some lights off?
Yeah, I'll come back on that one. Yeah, it's disappointing we haven't got the numbers in. I am speaking to the service and I am doing work with the manager in the area to look at the more comprehensive reporting on performance for adult social care. There is actually an operational one in place. I don't know why there's a disconnect and I'm trying to work on it, but there is a detailed operational performance management in place, and I'm trying to work out how we bring that through into the performance reporting.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, on page 274, there's reference to the staff survey, and I may have missed it, but I feel we got distracted by other stuff on that particular area last year. I don't think we gave it the time it deserved. So unless I did miss it, I'd certainly like to revisit the staff survey and explore what some of the findings were, some of the feedback from staff was, because I don't know.
Obviously can't speak on behalf of the service. It might be best to resolve to do that, and then the head of HR can come take that back to a later council. That is a separate report. Do you want to propose that, or?
Yeah, I'll take that on and speak to HR and see what we can bring back. We are actually fast approaching the next staff survey. So yeah, work is underway preparing for that at the moment. So I'll speak to HR and see how we feed back and close the loop.
Councillor Grotty.
Yes, I think Councillor Williams makes a very good point that several of us have actually been considering. You will recall that after the staff survey, we had a very brief report from HR, and we actually amended the recommendation because we were asked to accept the survey and the findings, and we actually said we would prefer to consider it as a work in progress. I remember because I think I proposed the recommendation myself, supported by colleagues. So we certainly look forward to further work in the area. Thank the Chief Executive and the officer for the confirmation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sims, please.
A silly technical question, really. Do we ever get the Q4 figures? Because we get it this time of year, but we aren't going to get Q4. And all I would think, if we don't, then we could actually go Q4, Q1, Q2, Q3, so we get them last year.
Yeah, we do report on Q4. So, and there's a couple of figures that are
Can we get it in
just
January?
understood annually anyway. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus, please.
I just want to share Councillor Bedford's points around. There's no number for called Q3 for housing as well, the void length and totals for the housing and waste and recycling as well. So not just on social care. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All these things being noted and will be acted upon. I would now like to ask for a proposer for the timetable, please. Councillor Sims, seconder, Councillor Marcus, all those in favour? Thank you very much. That's carried. Thank you. And with that, that concludes our meeting today. Thank you very much indeed.